Okay, now Bob Bowman, who is founder of the Patriots, and as I said, he flew 100 combat missions in Vietnam and was head of the Star Wars program under Ford and Carter, and he's right there. So this is his second visit to Portland, and you should check out his website. He's got an incredible biography, an amazing history. So he pretty much knows the inner workings of what's going on. So.
Thank you. And our Senate candidate, what was your name again?
Dave Brown.
Okay. Dave, I didn't catch your last name. Say it slowly or spell it.
Brownlow. DaveBrownlow.com.
Brownlow. Okay. Yeah. The Patriots is a 501c3. We do not endorse candidates, but we congratulate citizens who take it upon themselves to run against the establishment. And people like Dave should be commended for stepping forward and doing it. Thank you. Our organization has an overall objective to get a government that follows the Constitution, honors the truth, and serves the people. Pretty simple. We haven't had that kind of a government in a long, long time. We also have three immediate goals. Number one, to prevent an attack on Iran, which would destroy what's left of our national security by making enemies of Russia and China and cementing our role as the number one rogue nation on earth. Number two is to end the disastrous occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. And number three, partly because it may be the only way to accomplish the first two, is to impeach or indict Cheney and Bush. Now, I go to Washington quite a bit and talk to our so-called representatives to try to get them to do the right thing, defund the Iraq occupation, go forward with impeachment, and have a new independent investigation of 9/11. When I mention impeachment, I get all sorts of excuses. It's so late in their term. And we have an election coming up. And well, if we do that, we won't get anything else done. To which I say, great. But to me, impeachment is a moral imperative. It is, after all, the one and only remedy given us by the Constitution for an imperial presidency. I believe that the Democrats in Congress, the leadership, have made a calculated political decision that because Cheney and Bush are so incredibly unpopular, that if they can possibly just keep them in office until November, the Democrats will sweep the election. And they could be right. But on the other hand, their inaction could tick off their base so much that they turn out to be wrong. In any event, I tell them that there are more important things than partisan politics. And there are three very practical reasons for proceeding with impeachment, no matter how late it gets. The first is that impeachment proceedings, even if they never get to the Senate for judgment, just these proceedings will make it much easier for the generals and admirals in the Pentagon to refuse an order to attack Iran. Number two, impeachment will start taking goodies out of the box of unconstitutional powers that have been accumulated by presidents over the last few decades, and especially in the last 8 years, and will send a powerful message to future presidents that if they become a despot and trash the Constitution, that we won't let them just ride out their term and retire to a ranch in Paraguay. We're going to take them down. And impeachment is a powerful thing. If Cheney and Bush get impeached a day before the end of their term, they not only get kicked out of office for that day, they lose their retirement, their secret service, and their library. So don't tell me it's too late. Third, impeachment will send a message to the world that we, the American people, do not support the evil that has been done in our name. Now, as important as these things are, they are really just dealing with symptoms and not the root causes. There is a much larger problem, and that is the domination of our government by a handful of billionaires and multinational corporations. Excuse me. And it's this larger problem that I want to deal with this evening. Not just by giving you a laundry list of what's wrong, but by showing you how things could be better. I have a vision for America, vision I'd like to share with you tonight. It's a vision of an alternative future, I think a better future. Now, I don't have all the answers as to how to bring this future about, but I do know that before we can do so, we have to have a clear vision of what it is we want. So I'm going to give you an inaugural address as the new President of the United States, and what I suggest is that better future. How many of you heard me last year? Okay. I gave a State of the Union address last year. I have decided since that for a president to wait around for a year before taking such powerful actions is a gross mistake. It might not last that long. And so this is an inaugural address, day one, hour one of the presidency of a radical president. There's some overlap with last year, I'd say about 30%, so bear with me, but there are some things that just haven't changed in 14 and a half months. So I'm going to now ask you to pretend that I am speaking to you as President of the United States at my inauguration. In the audience are all the members of Congress, government officials, and, of course, you, the American people. I encourage you to clap and cheer like crazy when you hear something you agree with, and sit on your hands when you don't. That lets those watching on television know what it is they're supposed to believe. It's the Washington way. My fellow Americans, we come together in a time of multiple crises. There's global warming, peak oil, the plummeting dollar, falling wages and rising prices, a spiraling deficit, the health care shortfall, immigration, housing foreclosures, our deteriorating infrastructure, high school dropouts, astronomical incarceration rates, homeless veterans, rising suicide rates, the loss of our civil liberties, a growing alienation from our allies around the world, crushing debt, hungry children, inexcusable poverty, an exhausted military stressed by disastrous wars, and unbelievably, persistent ignorance and apathy among our people. Present company accepted, of course. The good news is that there are solutions for all these problems and crises, solutions which have been worked out in considerable detail and have been available for some time. The only reason these solutions have not been implemented is that they reduce the profits of giant corporations who exercise control over our government. You see, corporations over the last about 150 years have increasingly escaped government regulation and have accumulated political rights as if they were persons. This has included so-called First Amendment free speech rights to spend as much money as they want buying up politicians, drafting legislations for their profit, and buying up voters and elections with their monopoly corporate media. It's reached the point where foreign policy, international trade, and military decisions are made for short-term corporate profit to the detriment of our national security. Our government has become totally controlled by corporate interests, and this is the very definition of fascism. See, our problems are not due to inexperience or incompetence or a government that's too big or too small. We have these problems because those in government no longer serve us. They serve their corporate masters and benefactors and have deliberately chosen policies which harm our nation and our people. Those of us who dedicate our lives to peace, economic justice, and environmental preservation can make little progress in our struggles so long as ultimate power is in the hands of those who profit from war, poverty, and pollution. But here comes the good news. Tonight, that power has come to an end. I didn't get here tonight by taking corporate millions. I didn't get here by selling myself to the oil companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the insurance companies. To be quite honest, I'm not sure how I got here. But here I am, and as long as I am President of the United States, this government will serve the needs of the people, not the greeds of the wealthy elite. Now, turning things around won't be easy. What our Constitution empowers me to change, I shall, and I'll do it fast. But for much of what needs doing, I'll need the cooperation of you in Congress, and I ask for it tonight. You see, the Congress, the Constitution, does not make me the decider. Only the proposer and the implementer. You, the people's representatives in Congress, are the deciders. I am therefore vacating all the over 1,100 signing statements imposed by my predecessor. I'm revoking Presidential Directives 20 and 51, which give me dictatorial powers. I ask for repeal of the misnamed Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, and all the martial law and special and dictatorial powers acts passed in the last 8 years. This is not a monarchy, and I have no interest in being a dictator. Oh, I'll be called one because of the sweeping changes I am instituting. After all, returning to the Constitution is not just a change, it's a revolution. The first American Revolution was when we broke free of the tyranny of King George III. The second was when the federal government became increasingly powerful and centralized and dominated by corporate interests, resulting in a new tyranny, most recently under another George. Tonight represents the flowering of the third American Revolution, when we, the people, once again throw off the shackles of tyranny and take back our country and our Constitution. Now, restoring the Constitution means ending the imperial presidency and returning power to the people's representatives. But I warn you, members of Congress, if you continue to violate your constitutional responsibility to serve your constituents and instead serve only yourselves and the big money interests you are indebted to, if you ignore the Constitution and attempt to protect the crooked, corporate-dominated status quo, I will go over your heads to the American people and ask them to retire, all of you, regardless of party. In order to restore some semblance of our republic, we must give the people real choices, not false ones like those presented to us by the Republicrats and the Demopublicans. And we must have an informed electorate, not a brainwashed electorate. This means electoral reform and media reform. First, electoral reform. The constitutional principle of one person, one vote means that any method of voting which does not result in a paper ballot that can be counted, recounted, and audited as necessary is unconstitutional. I ask Congress and the states to return to paper ballots, institute full public financing of elections, proportional representation, preference voting, sometimes called instant runoff voting, abolition of burdensome petition requirements on independents and third parties, and so working people can actually vote, making Election Day a federal holiday. Now, many of these changes are designed to empower third parties. You see, there is nothing democratic about a two-party system when both parties are owned at the highest level by the same powerful interests. I also ask Congress to quickly pass a constitutional amendment restoring the original meaning of this document. This amendment says, corporations and other fictitious entities are not persons under this Constitution. And shall have none of the rights and privileges thereof. And now, media reform. I am ordering the Federal Communications Commission to immediately reinstate the Fairness Doctrine and the ban on multiple ownership. It's time for a return to family-owned newspapers and radio and television stations. The monopoly media conglomerates will have to sell off their assets immediately. Sorry, Mr. Murdoch. The public airways are once again going to belong to the people and serve the public interest. See, the key to ending fascism is to separate big money and political power, and we're taking immediate steps to do just that. As you know, the previous administration was forced to resign after Bush and Cheney were arrested as war criminals. They were arrested by Pentagon officers who refused to carry out illegal orders to attack Iran. Bush and Cheney also face court-martial proceedings for exploitation of the 9/11 tragedy to deceive this nation into unnecessary and illegal wars of aggression. For abuse of power as commander-in-chief and for violating the Constitution and their oath of office. The evidence of their guilt is absolutely overwhelming. The Pentagon officers involved have been promoted or commended for following their oath of office, which is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that includes a renegade president and vice president. In reality, these officers had no choice because, as I pointed out in a letter to the Pentagon last September, the Nuremberg principles enshrined in our Uniform Code of Military Justice say that we in the military have not only the right, but the duty to refuse an illegal order. Remember, we executed Nazis for just following orders. If I or any member of my administration ever gives such an illegal order, I expect you to take similar action against us. Your duty to the Constitution far exceeds any perceived loyalty to any person. You know, the real question about these events is why it fell to the military to take action. If you members of Congress had done your constitutional duty, these criminals would have been impeached long ago. It's a hackneyed expression, and I know you've heard it, but it's true. Clinton lied, no one died. If it was okay to impeach Bill Clinton for fibbing about an event which only embarrassed his family and soiled a blue dress, why did you refuse to impeach Cheney and Bush for deceiving us into war, costing so many thousands of lives? And listen up, my Republican friends. If it was right for Richard Nixon to have to resign under threat of impeachment for covering up an attempt to peek at the other party's plans, why was it not right for you to immediately get rid of those responsible, not just for 2 deadly wars of aggression, but for the loss of habeas corpus and posse comitatus, spying on American citizens, torturing suspects in the phony war on terror, saddling our grandchildren with more trillions in debt, and giving away our sovereignty with the North American Union, for goodness sakes, and trashing the Constitution itself? Where is the accountability? By the way, this Constitution says that the President and Vice President shall be removed, not may be removed, upon impeachment and conviction of such offenses. All you members of Congress who impeded impeachment are yourselves in violation of your oath of office, and your constituents ought to remove you. There is also evidence of a massive cover-up with respect to 9/11 itself. The official 9/11 report, tightly controlled by the White House, amounts to little but a whitewash. Even the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission, Governor Kane and Congressman Hamilton, admit that. I have spoken to them personally, and they've told me there are outright falsehoods in that final report, and that their most important conclusions were left out completely. Of course, they weren't responsible for it. They didn't write it. It was written by the White House. When you combine this with the confiscation of audio tapes, videotapes, black boxes, and other evidence by the FBI, it is clear that regardless of who was responsible for 9/11, the subsequent cover-up was itself a conspiracy involving elements of the White House and the intelligence establishment. And again, you members of Congress who voted against a new investigation are accessories to that conspiracy. Now, I'm being somewhat hard on Congress, and I think rightly so, but we have a chance for a new beginning. I expect to have a close working relationship with the new congressional leadership. The minority leader is a man I greatly admire and respect, Congressman Ron Paul of Texas. And the Speaker of the House is an old friend and a great patriot, Congressman Dennis Kucinich of Ohio. And as you know, he got the job when Nancy Pelosi lost her seat to Congresswoman Cindy Sheehan. But back to 9/11. The American people have still not been told who was really responsible for 9/11. Dedicated researchers have proven that it could not have happened the way the Bush administration said it did. I'm an old interceptor pilot, and hijacked airliners do not fly around for an hour and 40 minutes without being intercepted, unless our air defense system was sabotaged. And indestructible black boxes, by the way, they're not really black, they're bright orange, but never mind. Indestructible black boxes do not evaporate from the same fire from which an unharmed passport floats to the street below. Steel skyscrapers do not collapse at free fall speed because of a kerosene fire. Steel skyscrapers do not collapse at all because of a kerosene fire, never have and never will. And of course, Building 7 wasn't even struck by an aircraft. The truth about 9/11 is that after 7 years, we still don't know the truth about 9/11, and we should. And so should the families of victims. I am therefore appointing a commission to conduct a new and truly independent investigation of 9/11. This investigation will be co-chaired by David Ray Griffin and Richard Gage, and coordinated by my Vice President, Cynthia McKinney. Never again must we allow this nation to be stampeded into war under false pretenses. Now, 9/11 is not the only truth we're concerned about. There have been other cover-ups, including the murders of a number of our soldiers in the field, most of them women. If the Pentagon won't do a proper investigation, we'll do it for them. Parents have a right to know what really happened to soldiers like Pat Tillman and Lavina Johnson. Lavina Johnson was found in a Halliburton tent with a trail of blood. She'd obviously been dragged there. She died from a gunshot wound through the mouth. But she was beaten all over, and her hands were severely burned. And acid had been poured on her genitals, probably to destroy DNA. I don't know about you, but if I was going to commit suicide, I don't think I would beat myself up first and pour acid on my genitals. This was not a suicide. And there are at least a dozen other similar cases. A government that honors the truth must uncover the truth and then tell the truth. Now, we have at times, I think, including the last few years, had a government with bad policies. But we are a good people. What we have long needed is a government that reflects the values and the goodness of the American people. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which cooperates with big business to export our jobs and import cheap illegal labor, driving down wages for all American workers. Now, they don't want you to know this, but in spite of soaring productivity, real wages in this country today are a third of what they were in the 1950s. A third. If worker pay had kept up with executive pay, the typical worker would today be making $1.2 million a year. And the minimum wage would be $217 an hour. Now, of course, I'm not promising that, but we are taking immediate steps to benefit American workers. I asked Congress to pass legislation indexing the minimum wage for inflation. And if they had done that when they first created it, it would be over $15 an hour right now. I asked Congress to place tariffs on importation of goods manufactured by corporations who ship jobs out of our country. And limiting the corporate income tax deduction for executive compensation to 20 times the salary of their lowest paid worker. See, the ratio between CEO pay and worker pay used to be 20 to 1. Now it's over 600 to 1. This is a free country. Corporations can pay their executives whatever they want. But we don't have to give them a tax deduction for it. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which helps corporations despoil God's creation for profit. True conservatism demands that we preserve the land, the air, and the water for our grandchildren and their grandchildren for generations to come. And fiscal responsibility requires that polluters clean up their messes, not taxpayers. We will initiate bold programs in solar and wind energy with subsidies and tax breaks to make them not only competitive, but superior in the marketplace. At the same time, the Department of Energy will impose a ban on the construction of new fossil fuel and nuclear power plants. Yeah, I've got 3 degrees in nuclear engineering, and theoretically, a nuclear power plant can be made quite safe. But there is still no safe way to get rid of the radioactive waste, and until there is, there can be no new nuclear power plants. I'm requesting new CAFE standards, doubling the gas mileage of cars and light trucks, and that's just for starters. This will be coordinated by my Secretary of Transportation, Ralph Nader. There is no industrial free lunch, and there should be no corporate welfare. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which violates international law in its conflicts and denies its own citizens their constitutional rights. I have therefore ordered the release of all those being detained without charge. The closure of the prison at Guantanamo Bay. Don't worry, we'll find somewhere else for Bush and Cheney. And the end of the rendition program in which suspects are kidnapped and taken to secret foreign prisons to be tortured. I've pardoned a host of political prisoners, including Leonard Peltier, Mumia Abu-Jamal, and Border Patrol agents Campion and Ramos. I'm also pardoning all those incarcerated for possession or use of marijuana. And I'm directing the Secretary of Agriculture to support the production of industrial hemp. Those addicted to heroin and cocaine should be in treatment, not in jail. The failed war on drugs is over. All contracts for mercenaries, and by the way, this Constitution prohibits the use of mercenaries. All contracts for mercenaries, including all contracts with Blackwater, are immediately canceled. This includes contracts with the DOD, the CIA, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, which is being abolished. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which launches unnecessary wars of aggression. Now, I could speak for an hour about what we have done to the people of Iraq, but let's just deal with what we have done to our own. Over 4,000 of our finest have died. The lives of over 30,000 of our injured soldiers will never be the same. Tens of thousands of our young men and women have severe psychological problems because of what they have seen and what they have done. Hundreds of thousands have been poisoned by depleted uranium and will suffer lives of pain and disability and will father thousands of children with severe birth defects. Our military services are depleted and demoralized. The VA system is underfunded and overwhelmed. The National Guard and Reserves have been subjected to tour after tour, disrupting lives for even the lucky ones who return unscathed. Jobs have been lost, marriages have been destroyed, homes have been foreclosed, children have been estranged. And for what? We have alienated our friends around the world, made new enemies. We have created thousands of new recruits for Osama bin Laden, whether he's dead or alive, and further endangered the American people. And the longer we stay, the worse it will get. Consequently, I have asked the United Nations to send peacekeepers to Iraq to do a job we simply can't do as an occupying army. But whether or not they comply, within 3 months, we are going to support what's left of our troops by bringing them home while they're still alive. I've also ordered a halt to the use of depleted uranium weapons. They will be destroyed and stored as the dangerous radioactive waste they really are. Our values and goodness are not reflected by creating thousands of disabled veterans in wars of aggression and then refusing to take proper care of them. The signature wound of the Iraq War has been brain trauma, and yet the Bush administration slashed the budget for the Brain Trauma Center by 50%. The cost of caring for the disabled veterans of the Iraq War alone will be in the trillions of dollars. Yet it is a cost we must bear. The care of our soldiers injured in action, racked with PTSD, and poisoned by depleted uranium is not a discretionary expenditure to be avoided by delayed denial and bureaucratic red tape. It is a solemn obligation of this government, and it will be met. Our new Secretary for Veterans Affairs, Senator Max Cleland, will see to that. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which poisons 3 million Vietnamese with Agent Orange and 2 million Iraqis with depleted uranium and then walks away. We are going to provide medical care for these victims. It's time we took at least some responsibility for our actions. Similarly, we will take care of the World Trade Center first responders and rescue workers suffering from respiratory illnesses because the previous administration told them the air was safe to breathe when they knew it was not. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which promotes a globalization which depresses living standards at home and allows corporations to destroy the quality of life in banana republics and client states around the world. NAFTA has not only cost us millions of manufacturing jobs, it has allowed Archer Daniels Midland to undercut the price of corn in Mexico, driving millions of Mexican family farmers off the land and across our borders as illegal immigrants. In addition, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank have caused untold suffering around the world. If we can't reform them, we will abolish them. With respect to our relations with the government of Mexico, I have ordered the cancellation of the Security and Prosperity Partnership, or North American Union. Termination of the NAFTA superhighway, which would have cut both the U.S. and Canada in half and put all our longshoremen and truckers out of work. And the suspension of NAFTA completely until Mexico gives its workers union rights, protections for health, safety, and the environment, and wages at least comparable to our minimum wage. We should have done that before we signed NAFTA, but better late than never. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a system in which all our personal income taxes goes to pay interest on a staggering national debt created out of thin air. The Constitution authorizes Congress to print our money, not a private cartel. I ask Congress to eliminate the debt-based monetary system and pass legislation abolishing the Federal Reserve. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which trains death squads in the techniques of torture, intimidation, and assassination. The School of the Americas, by whatever name they choose to call it, is closed. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which gives most favored nation status to the butchers of Tiananmen Square and places an illegal secondary embargo on the impoverished people of Cuba. The embargo of Cuba just ended. Now, I recognize that we need advance information on the activities of Al-Qaeda and those who wish to do us harm. But our values and goodness are not reflected by, and our security is not enhanced by, an organization that promotes insurrection, instability, torture, terrorism, tyranny, murder, and war around the world in our name and with our money. John F. Kennedy and Jimmy Carter attempted to reform the CIA to get them to stick to gathering intelligence. They failed. I'm not going to try. As of this moment, I am abolishing the CIA. The many outstanding analysts in the CIA will be transferred to other agencies, including the DIA. This will be coordinated by my Director of Intelligence, Ray McGovern. He will also see that the activities of the NSA and NRO follow the law and respect the constitutional rights of our citizens. The days of warrantless wiretaps and using librarians as snitches is over. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which sends its working class youth around the world to kill the sons and daughters of working people in other countries. Our values and goodness are not reflected by sending our children to the Middle East to kill Arabs so the oil companies can profit from selling the oil under other people's sand, making us the target of terrorists. No more Iraqs. No more Kosovos, no more El Salvadors. These are not isolated incidents of stupidity. They're part of a long, bloody history of foreign policy being conducted for the financial benefit of the wealthy few. It is a new form of colonialism. It violates our Constitution. It endangers our national security. It mortgages our future. It sacrifices our children. And it will never happen again. Eliminating the mission of protecting the global financial interests of multinational corporations will allow us to have more security and reduce the defense budget by 80%. I've ordered the new Secretary of Defense, Admiral William Fallon, to begin an immediate recall of our forces all around the world. Think of it, after 63 years, the occupation of Germany and Japan has finally come to an end. With the exception of small Marine detachments guarding our embassies, all our military will be home within 3 months, and all overseas bases returned to the host countries. Needless to say, there will be no nuclear attack on Iran. My special envoy to the Middle East, Jimmy Carter, will be meeting with them to solve our differences. And once he is finished there, he will straighten out the Israelis and the Palestinians. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which for decades has been in violation of its treaty responsibilities to disarmament. I have ordered a halt to the design, testing, and production of nuclear weapons, and have directed the Secretary of State, Mike Gravel, to open negotiations toward the rapid and total abolition of nuclear weapons. Finally, I'd like to speak directly to the American people. I'm unlikely to last long in this job. Partly because I have terminal cancer from Agent Orange, and partly because there are powerful interests like insurance companies, oil companies, and bankers with hundreds of billions of reasons for wanting me assassinated. Oh, by the way, if you hear that I have suddenly committed suicide by shooting myself in the back with a shotgun, a long one, 3 times, you might be just a little suspicious. They'll call you a conspiracy theorist, but be suspicious anyway. But you know, it won't matter. They can kill me, but they can't kill what we started. It's too late for that. My words heard tonight by a few will tomorrow reach many. If the mainstream media won't cover it, YouTube will. My faith is that you, the American people, will not let the vision die with me. Can I count on you? I'm unlikely to get there with you, but like Brother Martin, I have been to the mountaintop, and I have seen the promised land. What I have seen is an America in which every person, regardless of race, creed, color, age, or sexual orientation, is valued and lives in dignity. Every person is cared for, and every person is free to reach his or her full potential. It's an America in which every family can be supported by one wage earner with one job paying a living wage. It's an America in which health care is provided to all as a right through a single-payer national health program. As a conservative, I believe that the only fiscally responsible way to provide universal health care is to eliminate the profit, the overhead, the red tape, and the interference between doctor and patient of the insurance companies by kicking them out of health care altogether. I see an America in which educators and teachers are highly valued and financially compensated accordingly. It's an America in which policemen, nurses, firefighters, poets, teachers, and garbage collectors can afford a nice house in a good neighborhood and live in comfort. Not just scientists, brain surgeons, CEOs, rock stars, lawyers, and basketball players. It's an America whose borders are secure, immigrants are legal, and workers are amply rewarded. It's an America in which faith is respected, culture is preserved, the arts are supported, and the Constitution is actually followed. It's an America that seeks not to be king of the hill, nor subservient to the World Trade Organization, but rather seeks to be a responsible, sovereign member of the family of nations. Nothing more and nothing less. An America that is free of the threat of terrorism because it is no longer feared and hated, because it no longer does hateful things to people all around the world. An America that leads the world, not just with military might, but with its vision, its compassion, its democracy, its productivity, its standard of living, its freedom, its care for the global environment, its treatment of its own people, and its goodness. Above all, it's an America at peace with the world and with its own people. That's the America I have seen, the America our people deserve, and the America you can build. Oh, it won't be easy. The billionaires will fight us every step of the way. They'll attempt to shut down our food supply, our gasoline supply, and our economy. And if they do, we'll respond. If we need to, we will nationalize industries. We'll use the National Guard to get supplies through. After all, they won't be in Iraq anymore. We'll print interest-free money like Lincoln's greenbacks. Those who have been for so long above the law will be so no longer. We will preserve this nation and our Constitution. But I can't do it alone. Each of you must do your part. Spread the word. Keep the vision alive. Drop your own pebbles in the pond and make some waves. Run for office. Never settle for anything less than a government which follows the Constitution, honors the truth, and serves the people. It matters not if my presidency is real or fanciful. My part is done. It is finished. The rest is in your hands. The future and the vision and the dream itself depend on you. May God sustain you in your struggles and bless America through your actions. We the people can win. We the people must win. We the people will win. Thank you and good night. Thank you. I'm going to make two more changes right now. First, this will be the first inaugural address followed by a question and answer period. It will also be the first inaugural address followed by taking up a collection. I'm sorry? My wife Maggie is passing out cards to you. One is a blue Patriot card which describes our organization and our objectives. In the back, it's also my personal business card. In the red stripe, you'll find my home address, our home telephone number, my email address, website. And then the white card is a sign-up card for you to join the Patriots. It doesn't cost anything. We have no dues. It also doesn't mean that you agree with everything I say. I mean, nobody can agree with everything. All it means is that you want a government that follows the Constitution, honors the truth, and serves the people. And if that sounds like you, sign up. You will be receiving our newsletters. Now, we send out 1 or 2 snail mail newsletters a year. So that's why we need your snail mail address. And we send out about 4 email newsletters a year. This isn't the kind of thing where you get inundated with 20 or 30 emails every day. We don't do that, okay? But it's very important that we can read your email address. So please print carefully. If we get one character wrong, it won't work, and we will never know why, and you won't hear from us, and you will never know why. So please print carefully. Upper, lowercase doesn't make any difference with email addresses, so you can use all block letters if you want to. We have a lot of trouble telling the difference between an L and a 1 and an O and a 0. So if there's any question, please help us out. Now, once those cards are around, Maggie will also be passing the basket for your contributions to our expenses for this trip. The contributions go to the Patriots. It's a 501c3. Everything you give is tax deductible. We have no salaries. We're all volunteers. Everything goes to the expenses of taking the message to the American people, and once in a while going to Washington to do battle with our Congress critters. We're in the midst of a 17,000-mile, 4.5-month-long tour of about 120 cities and towns. This is a good group here tonight. We have had audiences as small as 2 and as big as about 400. So this is the one and only presentation we have between Victoria, British Columbia, and Monterey, California. So it takes money to get across the country, and we ask you to be as generous as you can. Maggie has pens that she can loan to those who need them. Okay. Now, while the basket goes around, I am open to questions, and I saw one right over here.
I have two, hopefully very quick. One, why did you include abolishment of the Electoral College in your first set of reforms? And the second thing is a comment, really. It's not a question. I would be very concerned, given the militarization of our police, which frankly do not impress me as being very nice people in general, culture-wise, with the military transferring into, the police force, the home police force. So if you'd comment on those two things, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, militarization of the police, I mean, we need to completely restore our freedoms under the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And we absolutely have to insist on that. The members of Congress who voted to give them away through the Patriot Act and other acts violated their oath of office because all of that legislation is unconstitutional. Congress does not have the right to give away the rights that are given to us in the Constitution by simply passing the law. In order to do it, they have to amend the Constitution and get the states to ratify it. And that hasn't happened and won't happen, and they know it. So everything they've done to take away our rights is unconstitutional. And the militarization of the police falls in that same category. We must have the protections of the Bill of Rights as they are written and were passed in 1791. As for the Electoral College, there are pluses and minuses there. And there are small states that would probably never be visited by a political campaign if the Electoral College went away. I think the winner-take-all nature of our contests is the real problem. The fact that, if somebody takes California's votes by 500 votes, they get all the electoral votes of California. To me, that's a problem. I think we must empower independents and third parties, give the people a real choice, and require that the winner have a majority, not just a plurality. And that's the part of the whole thing of preference voting, is that people get a chance to vote for their real first choice, whether it's me or Cynthia McKinney or Ralph Nader or who. And then you can list a second choice. And then, if you want, you can put a third choice down, picking between the Democrat and the Republican, so that you're never throwing away your vote. And you don't have to worry about throwing away your vote. And if we had that system in 1992 when Ross Perot first ran, he would have been our president. Because although he only got 19% of the vote, and the other 81% was split between the Republican and the Democrat, when people in exit polls were asked who they really wanted to win, who they really had wanted to vote for, 51%, more than the Republican and Democrat combined, said Ross Perot. Then they were asked, well, why didn't you vote for him? Well, the media said that if we vote for Perot, we're throwing our vote away. So we have to change that whole mentality by having preference voting or single transferable vote or instant runoff voting, whatever you call it. And to me, that is much more important than getting rid of the Electoral College, which can work either way. But it is not something that the big money interests are using to control elections. But the electronic voting machines are, and the two-party system is.
Aren't we really talking about parliamentary democracy, and what's your opinion about going to parliamentary democracy and really handling this problem? It seems to me that the electoral college is one end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and that we're somewhere in the middle, and parliamentary democracy is a way of not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of advantages to a parliamentary democracy. We in this country have combined the job of head of government and head of state. And sometimes it doesn't work out all too well. I mean, Ronald Reagan was a very good head of state. I think he was a disastrous head of government. He should never have been president. He should have been queen. So, yeah, there's a lot to say for a parliamentary democracy. Yes.
Well, kind of a follow-up to militarization of those that supposedly protect and serve.
Yeah.
As a citizen, I keep hearing about these rights that have been taken away. I haven't given up any of these rights. Now, why should I not treat these people as enemy combatants?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, he said he hasn't given up any of his rights, and if police, militarized police, come after him, why shouldn't he treat them as enemy combatants? And I personally feel that majority of our local police are good, that the great majority of our military personnel are good. As a matter of fact, my belief is that if, I get asked this a lot, if Bush tries to declare martial law and cancel the election, for example, I don't think he'll get away with it, because I don't think he will succeed in rounding up us dissidents and putting us in those concentration camps built by Halliburton. It's my belief that the U.S. military will surround us, point their guns out, and protect us from Blackwater.
Yeah, but don't you see a financial collapse coming here relatively soon?
Oh, absolutely. Financial collapse. Yes, indeed. And that's because we, again, the big money interests that control our government are associated with multinational corporations who have no loyalty to any nation, and they are not dependent on the United States. What they are doing is using the government of the United States, using our military as their hired killers, and running the world, making an empire. But that empire will not be an American empire. It'll be a World Trade Organization empire. And so we have to take back our government from them. And then they will be impotent. But that's really what we're dealing with, I think.
So how do you... Okay, I've got 9 friends right now that just filed bankruptcy in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
All between the ages of 40 and 50 that have been long-term business owners, everything. Everything's collapsing around me.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, to me, I see this thing coming down. Okay, if it comes down, if it strips us of our food, our wealth, everything around us, and our families, how are you going to prevent martial law from taking us all down and from the chaos happening?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, but you see, I believe that the worse it gets economically, with things collapsing, the easier it's going to be for us to reach out to the rest of the American people and convince them that there's something wrong and get them working with us to take back our country. And so the only question to me, we're going to win. The only question is, how much worse does it have to get before we take back our country and make it better? And the people who are causing all of this don't care. They would just as soon turn us completely into a third world country. They have their wealth. Everything is siphoned to the top, and it does not trickle down. And so you have these people who are insulating themselves from this collapse with what they own and how they own it and where they own it, and they, I think, are perfectly willing to let the United States of America collapse completely. And
your belief that a standing army committed to the Constitution of the United States will resist the better equipped mercenary armies that are controlled by the multinational corporations?
yes, I do.
Okay.
But, do I believe that the military being devoted to the Constitution and the American people will be able to take on and protect us from heavily armed Blackwater mercenaries and whatnot? And yes, I do. Right now, of course, a lot of our troops are spread all around the world, and that's one of the reasons why we have to bring at least the National Guard and Reserves home as quickly as possible, because they're on our side. I gave this lecture at Fort Thomas, Kentucky, which is an Army Reserve base. And I talked to a lot of young troops just back from Iraq. They were in their desert fatigues. And they're right there. They're right with us. And I'm actually quite encouraged. I did send an open letter a year ago, last September, to the generals and admirals in the Pentagon. And there is now a battle going on within the Pentagon and within the CIA for the heart and soul of this country. It's a battle over whether or not the Cheney faction can get them to attack Iran, or whether the more moderate wing of the Trilateral Commission, represented by Zbigniew Brzezinski and Defense Secretary Gates and whatnot, whether that group will be able to hold out. There have been firings both directions. My reading of the tea leaves now is that the more moderate faction is gaining ascendancy, and that a war with Iran is much less likely today than it was a year ago. Yes.
I think that the ground troops will do whatever the generals tell them to do. So my question is where were the generals and where were the hierarchy of the military just before we attacked Iran?
Well,
Iraq, excuse me.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I said in my open letter to them a year ago that I regret not having sent such a letter prior to the shock and awe attack on Iraq. I depended on the corporate media, and I won't make that mistake again. I don't think that there was the recognition at that time that we were being so massively lied to. But I think that they recognize that now. And there are a great many generals and admirals who are on our side. It's true some of them have been purged, like Admiral William Fallon and Admiral Stubblefield and a bunch of others. But they can't get them all. And now it appears that Secretary of Gates is probably purging those who were doing Cheney's bidding, like sending that B-52 from Barksdale, from Minot to Barksdale with nuclear missiles on board. That was not an accident. There is no way that that could have been an accident. So we have a real battle going on. You also see it in the CIA. Back before we attacked Iraq, the CIA gave correct intelligence to our government. But Cheney and Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz and all those neocon fascists twisted it around, and what Bush and the Congress and the American people got was just the opposite. So you notice that this time the CIA came to a conclusion about a year ago that Iran had ceased its nuclear weapons program 5 years ago and still has not restarted it. And instead of just quietly handing that report to the neocons in the administration, this time they went public with it. Because there are people in the CIA who don't want another disastrous war and to have it blamed on them for giving bad intelligence to the government. So they went public so that they could not be blamed and so that the American people would know the truth. So, there are great differences between now and the run-up to the Iraq War, when those of us who were opposing it and screaming that this was an impeachable offense, a war crime against the people of Iraq, and treason against the United States of America if they went ahead with it. Those of us who were saying those things were completely ignored. It's not happening this time, and we're not getting ignored. Yes?
By what constitutional authority, what allows the creation of mercenary armies like Blackwater?
There isn't any constitutional authority for it. There isn't any constitutional authority for most of what this administration has been doing. So, that's why we've got to take control and get a government that follows the Constitution. And that mercenary army is extremely dangerous to us as American citizens. Right in the back. Yes.
Me? Okay, I'll take it.
Yes.
Sorry. What's stopping him from committing another false flag operation to push us into another war with Iran?
We are. The 9/11 Truth movement, one of the greatest values of the 9/11 Truth movement is that by continuing to put the pressure on, we are convincing the perpetrators that if they try it again, we're going to catch them red-handed. And I think the 9/11 Truth movement is deterring another false flag attack to get us into war with Iran.
It only takes a short while to look into 9/11 to know it's an inside job. It's very easy to figure out as an inside job. To me, I really don't know. Do you think the Congress and the senators and the people, the high military, they all know it and they're just keeping dumb about it? Even Ron Paul, do you think he has to know?
Well, there are some that I know, okay? There are others that may be oblivious. There are lots of real smart people out there who just have not accepted the truth that 9/11 is not what the official report painted it to be. And you can't get a member of Congress to sit down and watch a 2-hour video, loose change or something, okay? What I found to be very effective in my lobbying was I have a 3-minute video on DVD, and I can get them to sit down with me and watch a 3-minute video. And that 3-minute video, which I call my smoking gun video, is Building 7, period. It starts with about 30 seconds or so of the BBC announcing the collapse of Building 7 before it happened, with the building clearly visible over her left shoulder, still standing. Okay. Then it shows maybe 45 seconds or so of Larry Silverstein. It discusses his insurance policy for $3.5 billion, specifically covering acts of terrorism taken out 6 weeks before 9/11. And then it shows Larry Silverstein talking about his decision to pull it. And then it just shows the building coming down. View after view of the building coming down with no visible fire, no pancaking, the floors staying exactly the same distance apart all the way to the ground, the slight collapse in the middle and the whole thing falling inward into its own footprint. Classic, perfect, controlled demolition. Could not have been caused by anything else. And that 3 minutes should be enough to wake people up that there is something wrong, that they have been lied to, because the official 9/11 Commission report didn't even mention Building 7, a building that, of course, was not struck by an aircraft. So, and when you watch the BBC announcing the collapse of Building 7, they even tell you why it collapsed. They give you the party line. It collapsed because it was damaged in the morning attack and whatnot. Total baloney. And with the building still standing there, you know, how do they know it collapsed and why it collapsed before it happened? To me, if that doesn't convince somebody that there's hanky-panky going on and we're being lied to, then I don't know what they're smoking.
Well, if someone like you who has access to the people who have the capacity to make decisions about that, if you're not making any headway with it, I mean, it should be a chain reaction among people seeing this that they would do something other than respond in complete silence.
Yeah, well, you have to understand that the current members of Congress on both sides of the aisle have become complicit in the cover-up. And
so once you're on that slippery slope, how do you propose to get these people off of it?
Yeah.
well, my solution, of course, is to get rid of every constituent except maybe Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich and a handful that are with us. Get rid of all the rest, regardless of party. Vote in somebody like Dave. You know, let's get some people in there who will represent us. Yes?
Just very briefly, I just want to say that I've been very encouraged by how successful I've been converting friends and relatives, people who I've known for years, who actually are willing to sit down and watch a video with me.
Yeah.
I mean, 9/11 Press for Truth works really well for people who are sort of not sciencey, but gets the point. And then come in with a Jones, you know, the physicist from BYU thing.
Right.
After they are willing to sit through the first one. And, you know, I mean, like my parents and cousins, and it's been pretty good. And then, a question. I saw a squib in the Oregonian just last week that actually a report has now come out on Building 7, finally. You know, it was like, you know, the mystery solved type of thing.
Right.
But
Pack of lies.
Well, yeah, I haven't gone in to look at it yet. Have you looked at that new report, and can you tell us anything about it?
I haven't had a chance to look at the whole thing, but I've seen enough to know that it's a more tortured whitewash than anything they've even done before. And by the way, if somebody won't sit down and watch a couple-hour video with you, you might try my 3-minute DVD to get them hooked. Then maybe they'll agree to watch one of the others with you. And that 3-minute DVD is on my website, downloadable. You're free to download it, copy it as many times as you want, and use it. Yes?
I'm wondering if you think that population control is part of the agenda, and one of the false flag possibilities might be releasing the bird flu or some other false flag event that's not within the same, style as like an attack, like a physical attack.
Yeah, I think it's possible but not probable, and the portion of the ruling elite who really want to cull the herd, I think, are in the minority. And not because the rest of them are above it, but they need somebody to buy their crap at Walmart. Yes?
What's going to prevent Israel from attacking Iran?
Well, nothing will prevent Israel from attacking Iran except the knowledge that if they do it, the United States is not going to back them up. And I don't know what this administration has said to them recently, but you have to understand that my reading of the tea leaves is that the Cheney and the neocons are now, in essence, out of control, and that Brzezinski and Gates and some of the other folks are driving the train and may well have passed instructions to the Israelis saying that they will not be backed up. Now, Brzezinski is not all good. He wants to defeat Russia and China, and that does not bode well for us. However, one good thing about Brzezinski is that his foreign policy in the Carter administration, and even later under the first President Bush, was more even-handed between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And it's only the Clinton administration and the W administration which has just given the Israelis carte blanche and been totally subservient to AIPAC. And by the way, if I actually was president, one of my first trips would be to Israel to sit down with the Prime Minister and tell him that when we finish, we're going to walk out and hold a joint press conference. And in that press conference, he and I together are going to cut the strings between AIPAC and our Congress and between AIPAC and his Knesset. And the same folks, the neocons, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Pearl, and a whole string of them, 90% of whom hold dual citizenship. These folks have not only been dictating foreign policy to the United States, but they've been dictating foreign and military policy to Israel as well. And they wrote the foreign and military policy for Benjamin Netanyahu. So we have to get these Israeli arms dealers, which is what Richard Pearl started as, we need to get them out of power on both sides. And we need also to have that Israeli Prime Minister announce his willingness to negotiate a final settlement with the Palestinians on the basis of an Israeli withdrawal to pre-1967 borders. And the rest of the details of the solution are in Jimmy Carter's book, Peace, Not Apartheid.
Can you take our parks back and our monuments back from the UN too while you're at it?
What parks and monuments?
The national parks. They've all been handed over to the UN. The Yellowstone, everything. It's gone. Look it up.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. United Nations? I don't.
Yeah, the Yellowstone, all the national parks, all the monuments were all signed over by Clinton.
Have to look into that. That's sounds weird to me.
It's right on the internet.
What?
Sustainable development, taking back the wildlands.
Say it again.
Sustainable development,
Sustainable development.
taking
Absolutely.
back the wildlands. Part of that, I think.
The one reason we need, one of the many reasons we need to split up the giant agribusiness concerns and return to family farmers is because family farmers are the ones that develop and maintain sustainable development. And they are the innovators in areas like that. We also need to get the whole world, again, using natural seeds and get rid of Monsanto's frankenseeds. Way in the back, yes.
I've been trying to say something. Do you remember Larry Silverstein being interviewed by Charlie Rose?
Charlie Rose, I'm not sure. Which one was that? What did he say?
February 27, 2003. And he said something about pulling the plug. And I read that transcript of that program, and it wasn't on there. It was cut out. And that is a conspiracy. And then one other thing I'd like to mention. Building number 7 went down at 5:30 p.m., no fire or anything. It went down. That was a demolition. Must have been. So the people that did that performed that, they must have had to have performed the demolition on the World Trade Center towers also.
Well, sure. But it's that's the whole point of this 3-minute smoking gun video is once a person has to face the fact that Building 7 was a controlled demolition, then it's so much easier to say, well, excuse me, we have lots of evidence that 1 and 2 were controlled demolitions as well, including the traces of the thermate and all the rest of the stuff.
Has anyone ever tried to find out who brought those that building number 7 down? What company did that?
No, that's the kind of thing for which we need an independent investigation. We do not have subpoena power. We need somebody who does. Yes?
You mentioned the danger of assassination. Type in your computer the bulletproof George Washington. He was a captain in the British Army when he was 20 years old. And the British heard that the French were coming down the Ohio River and were going to set up a fort. So he was appointed to be a leader to guide the troops over there. On the way over, the British went there with a ceremony with drums and everything and bright uniforms to warn them to get out of those uniforms. Well, they got in a small valley and all at once with arrows and bullets started coming from the trees, and the British general said, "Stay in ranks." George Washington said, "Take cover, take cover." They disobeyed him. Before long, all the British officers were either dead or shot off their horses. The general himself was mortally wounded and died later. George Washington had 4 bullet holes in his toes, 2 horses shot off from under him, fragments of lead in his hair. And 15 days later, the Indian chief, who was the leader there, said he wanted to see that young man that no bullet will ever kill. And he said he fired at him himself with a musket that never missed 15 times. Type that in your title, The Bulletproof George Washington. You see the fantastic faith that he had in the Lord and how he was protected. There is our answer.
Okay. Let's see. We're running out of time, and I'm running out of steam. but I'll take one more question back there. Yes.
I just want to ask if you're going to be on any alternative media that maybe get a bit more views than maybe a YouTube channel like Coast to Coast, Democracy Now. Like these are great resources that would love to have a guest like you.
Well, I am available to any of those things. Air America, Democracy Now, Bill Moyers, I mean, yeah. But I haven't been able to do anything. I'm doing what I'm doing, and I don't have time to press that. But if anybody can get them interested and have them call me, I'd love to do it, and I'm available. Huh?
You might get a copy of your speech today. I'll put it on TV next Saturday. I have a TV show every 2 weeks.
Okay. Now, finally, I just want to say, never give up. Thank you and good night.